After I fixed her sink, I tried to leave. Then she stopped me. Not yet. I still need you here. The sink had stopped dripping, but the kitchen floor still dipped under my boots. I zipped my canvas tool bag, and the metallic rasp sounded too loud in the sudden silence. A minute earlier, the stainless steel basin had been tapping water into a mixing bowl every 3 seconds. Now the tap was quiet. The wrench was back in my hand. And Elena Parker stood between me and the narrow walkway out of her kitchen, as if letting me leave might make the rest of the house give way. She wore a cream sweater buttoned high under a soft cardigan, the sleeves pushed up like she had been fighting paperwork before I arrived. One hand rested on the oak counter, the other gripped the strap of my canvas tool bag. Her eyes did not stay on me. They kept dropping to the floorboards between us, to the shallow sag near the island that most people would mistake for an old house quirk. I noticed it because old houses talked. They creaked, shifted, settled, warned. I had spent 10 years listening to timber under weight. A floor that dipped after plumbing work was not a mood. It was a confession. "I can pay you for the hour," Elena said. Her voice carried a thin edge that did not belong in a quiet suburban kitchen. Outside her window, a robin hopped along the fence, ordinary and bright. Inside, the silence after the dripping tap felt like something holding its breath. "You don't owe me anything for tightening a slip nut," I said, keeping my tone even. "The leak has stopped." She still did not let go of the tool bag. I looked down at her hand on the canvas strap, then at the floor. Her thumbnail pressed into the side of her finger until the skin blanched. It was a small, bruising habit, the kind people picked up when they had been making themselves stay calm for too long. "The water isn't the problem," she said. "The man who did the pipes, he did the floor joists too." That should have been my warning. I set the tool bag on the granite counter. "Show me." She led me to the basement door at the end of the hall. The house was a century-old craftsman with good bones and careless scars. Someone had pulled trim off the walls, stacked old cabinets against the dining room, and left fresh sawdust ground into the corners. The place should have smelled like a renovation in progress. Instead, the air that came up from the basement smelled damp and cold, like wood that had been opened and left to worry. Elena paused with her hand on the stair rail. "You don't have to get involved," she said, but she was already opening the door. "I can look," I said. "Looking isn't taken over." She glanced back at me, and for the first time, the tight set of her mouth eased by a fraction. I clicked on my heavy-duty flashlight. The beam cut through the dim crawl space and landed on the exposed ceiling beneath the kitchen. I had expected sloppy work. I had expected lazy bracing, cheap fasteners, maybe a few code violations. I had not expected 3 load-bearing Douglas fir joists to be sawed almost clean through. The contractor had notched the wood to run new plumbing lines, except notched was too polite. He had cut through the bottom cords of the joists, the tension side, the part of the timber that kept the floor from folding under a live load. Above us sat cabinets, appliances, stone countertop, and whatever weight the house had been quietly carrying since the damage was done. I swept the flashlight across raw splinters and fresh sawdust caught in the cobwebs. One pipe ticked lightly against the wood. Elena flinched at the sound. "When did Vance Construction do this?" I asked. 3 weeks ago. She stayed on the bottom stair with both hands wrapped around the rail. I told him the kitchen floor felt wrong. He said old houses settle. Then he sent me the final invoice, $40,000. When I refused to pay until the work was inspected, he threatened the lien. "A mechanic's lien." She nodded. One quick movement. He said if I don't pay by Friday, he files it with the county. My lender told me an unresolved lien can trigger a review of my mortgage. I just got this house after the divorce. If the bank calls the loan or freezes my refinance, I'm fighting foreclosure before I can even fix the floor. There it was. The load she'd been holding by herself, not just bad construction, not just a bill. A house that was supposed to be her clean slate, a contractor using legal pressure like a pry bar, and a Friday deadline closing around her throat. In my trade, my first mentor used to say, "You don't force a seized joint, you ease the weight off it." He meant timber. He meant swollen wood, stubborn joinery, the old beams in barns that had been carrying roofs longer than I had been alive. But the principle applied to people, too. If you tried to yank something loose while it was still under pressure, it split. First, you supported the weight, then you cleared the debris. Only then did the mechanism have a chance to move. "Elena," I said, turning the flashlight down so it would not glare in her eyes, "he can file a notice. That doesn't mean he wins. And he definitely cannot collect $40,000 on work that violates structural code." She pressed her lips together. "This is not just a defect," I added. "It is an active hazard. If you put a full refrigerator, a heavy table, or a cast iron tub above this span, it could fail. I need to stabilize it now." Her fingers tightened around the rail. "Now? I have 4x4 hemlock posts in my truck. I can build a temporary shoring wall under the kitchen and transfer the load until the city inspector sees it. It is emergency stabilization, not a permanent repair." I kept my hands at my sides. "Do you want me to do that?" She looked from the severed joists to the stairs, then to me. The house made another small ticking sound above us. "Yes," she breathed. "Please." It took 2 hours. I hauled lumber from my flatbed and carried it through her back door one piece at a time. I set base plates on the basement floor, measured the span, cut posts to height, and used a 20-ton hydraulic bottle jack to lift the sagging floor by 1/8 of an inch. No more. You did not bully an old structure back into shape. You asked it to move only as much as it could safely give. The sharp whine of the impact driver echoed beneath the kitchen as I sank structural screws through the temporary posts. Elena came down once with a glass of water and stayed on the bottom step, watching the wall take form. Our fingers did not touch when she handed me the glass. I noticed because she looked ready to apologize for even that. "You're very exact," she said. "Wood is honest." I took a drink and set the glass on a shelf where it would not fall. It tells you what it can handle if you know how to listen. When the last post was locked in, I climbed the stairs and tested the kitchen floor. The dip was still there, but the bounce was gone. The silence changed. It no longer sounded like the house was waiting for a crack. Elena stood beside the island, both hands flat on the counter. She turned her head slowly, listening with me. The dripping stopped. She said, and the floor stopped arguing. I picked up my tool bag. "The house is safe for tonight." "For tonight?" she repeated. I nodded. "For tonight? Tomorrow we document every cut, every substituted material, and every invoice he inflated. Then we put the evidence in front of someone who can make his threat useless." Her eyes lifted. "We?" The word stopped me. I had said it too easily. I was her neighbor, the younger guy who lived next door, the one she nodded to at the mailbox, the one her friends probably filed under polite, useful, and forgettable. I was not her lawyer. I was not her contractor of record, and she had already been cornered by a man who turned expertise into leverage. "I can write down the defects." I corrected, "You can take them to the housing authority, or your attorney. I do not want you to feel obligated because I braced the floor." Elena looked past me to the hemlock post below the open basement door. Then she looked back at the stack of invoices on the counter. "Nathan," she said quietly, "I don't know how to read building code. I don't know how to prove he charged me for materials he never used. I don't know how to fight a contractor who screams until I stop talking." She folded her arms, then unfolded them, as if she disliked the defensive posture and forced herself out of it. "If I try to do this alone, I'll pay him just to make him go away." "Don't do that." The words came out too sharp. I caught myself and lowered my voice. "He damaged your home. He does not get rewarded for that." Her mouth trembled once, then steadied. "Then help me," she said. "Please, but don't take it away from me." That was the sentence that mattered. I set the tool bag down again. "Then, we do it together. You make the decisions. I handle the measurements and translate the code. We put your name on every complaint." For the first time since I had arrived, she took her hand off the counter. "Okay," she said, "together." The next evening, my kitchen table became a war room. Rain tapped lightly against the windows, not dramatic enough to be a storm, just persistent enough to make the house feel set apart from the rest of the block. Elena arrived carrying a cardboard file box and a tote bag full of paper. She had changed into a buttoned blouse under a cardigan, her hair clipped back with a pencil, sleeves pushed up like she had come prepared to work rather than be comforted. I liked that about her. She did not want to be rescued from the evidence. She wanted to learn how to use it. I laid contractor invoices across the table. She sorted receipts by date. I pulled up the residential code on my laptop and printed the sections about notching and boring structural members. She marked every check she had written to Vance Construction with a blue sticky note. The pendant light above us made the ink shine on the paper. After 20 minutes, she rubbed 2 fingers against her temple and blinked hard at the overhead glare. I stood, dimmed the main fixture, and switched on the smaller table lamp instead. Then I sat back down without making a speech about it. "Thank you," she murmured. "He charged you for LVL beams," I said, tapping a line item with my pen. "Laminated veneer lumber, high-strength engineered material. He did not install LVL. The exposed joists are old Douglas fir, and the new blocking he added is standard SPF, lower grade, cheap, not even properly fastened. So it's fraud." "Yes, and we can prove it." Her shoulders dropped a little, but not with defeat this time, with focus. The kitchen smelled of black tea, sawdust from my work jacket, and damp paper from the file box. I got up, poured 2 mugs of tea, and set one near her elbow, then opened the refrigerator. "You do not have to feed me," Elena said before I could ask. "I know. I took out leftovers from the day before. Chicken, rice, roasted carrots. This is selfish. If you collapse over my table, I have to fill out imaginary paperwork." She stared at me for half a second, then laughed. It was small and surprised, the kind of laugh that escaped before a person could protect themselves from it. It made the whole room feel less like a legal office and more like 2 neighbors trying to beat a bad man with a microwave and a stack of receipts. I heated the food and put a plate in front of her. She ate 3 bites before she spoke again. This house was supposed to be my clean slate. I kept my attention on the invoice in front of me, giving her room to continue or stop. My ex-husband controlled everything, the accounts, the schedule, even what color the guest room could be because he thought certain shades made him look tired on video calls. She looked out the rain-dark window at the crooked bird feeder in my yard, swinging stubbornly from one loose hook. When I left, I bought this place because it was mine. A wreck, but mine. I wanted to fix one thing that nobody could take credit for. Vance saw that. He saw I was alone. He saw a person with a house worth protecting. I said, "That is not the same as a person who can be bullied." She looked down at her hands. "I signed too fast." "You hired a licensed contractor," I said, sliding the material invoice closer to her. "Trusting a professional to do the job is not a character flaw. Cutting through load-bearing joists and billing you for materials he never installed is the flaw." She nodded once, and I saw the sentence land somewhere useful. We worked until after midnight. By the end, we had a preliminary structural deficiency report, a list of suspect invoices, photographs of the severed joists, and a timeline of payments. Elena named the PDF herself, Vance_counter_notice_draft. She typed the file name slowly, every letter deliberate. Before she left, she stood near my back door with the folder against her chest. "The kitchen is quiet now," she said. "The dripping tap?" "No." She looked toward the dark outline of her house through the rain, the panic. I did not step closer. "Temporary shoring does that," I said. "It doesn't fix the whole structure. It just makes room to think." Her eyes softened. "You always talk about houses like they're people. People are usually more complicated." I said, "Houses complain in measurable ways." She laughed again, quieter this time, and walked home under my porch light. Thursday morning, the plan fractured. I was at the lumber yard, loading cedar for a client, when my phone vibrated on top of a stack of boards. Elena's name flashed across the screen. "Nathan," she said when I answered. Her voice was tight enough to snap. "There's a notice on my door." "I'm on my way." I left the cedar, tossed my gloves into the passenger seat, and drove back to our street. Elena stood on her front porch, holding a heavy manila envelope. The morning was bright, but cold air moved through the open door behind her and lifted the corners of the paper in her hand. I stopped 2 feet away. "Show me." She handed over the envelope. It was a formal notice of intent to file mechanic's lien from Vance's attorney. The language was dense and meant to scare. The deadline was worse. Vance had moved it up. He claimed she had denied him access to cure the alleged defect and demanded $40,000 by close of business that day. If she refused, the lien would be recorded the next morning. He said Friday. Elena said, "Now it's today." He says I blocked him from fixing it, but I only asked for an inspection first. If that lien hits county records, my lender flags the house. I called the bank. They said a disputed lien can freeze my renovation loan review. She trapped the edge of the envelope against her ribs when it shook. I can't lose the house. Nathan. Cold air slid across the porch. The paper rasped against her cardigan. I folded the notice carefully. He is trying to panic you into paying before anyone qualified sees the damage. It's working. Then we remove the weight. She looked at me. I called Chief Inspector Ramirez. I said, he knows my work. I can request an emergency structural hazard inspection by noon. But if he comes here, Vance needs to be present, and you need to be the one who tells Ramirez what happened. Her eyes flicked to the floor behind me. The kitchen, the shoring wall, the house she had bought after leaving one controlling man and accidentally hiring another. I can stand beside you, I said. I can provide measurements, code references, and the material comparison. But it is your house. I will not speak over you in it. I held her gaze. Do you want me to handle the calls, or do you want one of them? Her breath came in once, uneven, then steadied. I'll call Vance, she said. You call the inspector. By noon, Elena's kitchen felt like a courtroom built out of oak cabinets and bad decisions. I had set my laser level, digital caliper, printed structural report, photographs, material invoices, and code sections on the island. No clutter, no drama, just the tools proper to the arena. If Vance wanted noise, I was bringing measurements. Elena stood near the sink with the notice of intent placed face up in front of her. The dripping tap was silent. The entire room was... A heavy knock rattled the front door. She opened it herself. Chief Inspector Ramirez walked in first. High-vis vest zipped over a flannel shirt, clipboard under one arm. Vance followed behind him, broad-shouldered and red-faced, carrying the self-importance of a man used to homeowners becoming small in their own houses. Elena, Vance said, before the inspector had even wiped his boots. This is unnecessary. You're wasting city resources because you have buyer's remorse over a custom job. Elena closed the door. The click sounded sharp. I called because my kitchen floor was about to collapse, she said. Vance gave a loud false laugh and looked at Ramirez. She's exaggerating. A few standard notches for plumbing, nothing that violates code. Ramirez turned toward me. Nathan Reed. Didn't expect to see you on this one. Consulting as a timber framer, I said. Emergency shoring only. Homeowner authorized it. Elena picked up the printed authorization sheet we had written that morning and handed it to Ramirez. Her name and signature were at the bottom. Ramirez glanced at it, then nodded. Good. Let's see the basement. For the next 20 minutes, the house told the truth. I led Ramirez down the stairs with Elena behind him and Vance behind her. In the crawl space, the flashlight beam caught the severed joists and the temporary hemlock shoring wall. I handed Ramirez the caliper. I did not explain first. I let him measure. Then I cited the code sections, the allowable notch depth, the load-bearing span, the invoice that claimed LVL installation, and the photographs showing none had been used. Vance tried to interrupt twice. Ramirez silenced him without looking up. Let him finish. That was the third-party acknowledgement that mattered. Not praise, not applause. Just a professional recognizing the difference between noise and evidence. This is not a notch, Ramirez said finally, straightening under the low ceiling. This is a compromised structural member, 3 of them. He looked at Vance. If Reed had not shored this wall, The first floor was unsafe under normal residential load. Vance's mouth worked once before words came out. It's easily corrected. I can sister the joists and... You are not touching my house again. Elena's voice came from halfway up the stairs. She stood with one hand on the rail, not gripping it for support this time, simply holding her place. Her face was pale, but her voice was steady enough to fill the basement. You billed me for materials you never used, she said. You cut through load-bearing joists, ignored my concerns, and sent a lien threat when I asked for inspection. You will withdraw the notice of intent in writing today? Ramirez will attach his report to my counter notice, and my attorney will send it to your office and the licensing board. Vance stared at her as if he had never heard her finish a sentence before. You think you can scare me with paperwork, she said. I learned how to read it. Ramirez was already writing, I'm issuing a red tag stop work order on Vance Construction for this address. No further work by this contractor pending review. Vance's face went a darker shade of red. This is ridiculous. No, Ramirez said. This is measurable. The word pleased me more than it should have. Vance stormed upstairs, but he stopped in the kitchen when Elena blocked the path to the front door, not with her body in danger, but with a document. She set a single-page withdrawal form on the island. We had printed it that morning from his attorney's own template. Sign it, she said. Vance looked at Ramirez, then at me, then at Elena. You're not getting a dime back for demo, he snapped. I'll take that up through the counterclaim. Elena placed a pen beside the form. Sign. He signed. Not because he had become decent, not because he understood the harm he had done. He signed because the weight had shifted off Elena and onto the evidence, and evidence was harder to intimidate. When the door finally closed behind him and Ramirez, the silence in the kitchen was different. It was not heavy. It was not waiting. It was the kind of silence that came after a brace held. I placed the laser level and caliper back into my canvas bag. My hands moved automatically, packing each tool into its slot. Ramirez would file the official report by 3. Elena's attorney had the counter notice. The lien threat had been withdrawn in writing. The shoring wall would keep the house safe until the permanent repair was permitted. The immediate crisis was over. My job here was done. I zipped the tool bag, the metallic rasp echoing across the kitchen, and lifted it off the floor. Elena, I said, keeping my tone professional because that was the last boundary left. Ramirez will send you the red tag report by email. Forward it to your attorney. Don't speak with Vance directly again. If he contacts you, everything goes through counsel. She stood by the sink, the signed withdrawal form in one hand. I know, she said. I nodded and took a step toward the front door. Nathan. I stopped. She crossed the kitchen floor. Her steps were steady. When she reached me, she did not grab the tool belt or the bag or any excuse to make contact before speaking. She just stood in front of me with the signed withdrawal form between us. I reached for the tool bag. Elena stepped in front of it. Not yet. She said, I still need you here. The sentence landed without the panic of the morning. No pleading, no barter, no helplessness. She was standing in her own kitchen, with her house safe, her evidence filed, and her contractor's threat withdrawn. She had already reclaimed the room. That was why I took the sentence seriously. You don't need a carpenter anymore, I said. The house is stabilized. The lien notice is withdrawn. Anything personal can wait until the report is filed. I know. She looked down at the paper in her hand, then set it on the counter. That's why I'm saying it now. Not because Vance is here. Not because I'm scared. Because when I was scared, you stood beside me without taking the room from me. The canvas strap creaked in my hand. She placed her fingertips on the edge of the structural report. Not on me. You dimmed the light when my head hurt. You made me eat before I tried to read legal language. You built the shoring wall, then taught me enough to stand in front of Ramirez myself. Her mouth curved, not quite a smile yet. I still need you here. Nathan, not as a rescue, as a choice. The old sentence rose in my mind again. You don't force a seized joint, you ease the weight off it. I set the bag down. What do you want? I asked. Her answer came without hesitation. A quiet hour, no documents, no Vance, no pretending this was only about the house. The refrigerator hummed behind her. Outside. A truck passed on the street and kept going. I held out my hand, palm up, over the corner of the report. Elena looked at it, then placed her hand over mine for one steady breath. She let go first. That mattered, too. We sat at the kitchen table while the afternoon light moved across the cabinets. We did not kiss. We did not make promises big enough to trip over. We drank the black tea she made, and the first thing she said after 10 minutes was that my handwriting looked like a carpenter had lost an argument with a spider. I laughed hard enough that the tea nearly went down wrong. There it is, she said. What? The sound of a man accepting constructive criticism. My handwriting built that shoring wall. Your handwriting should remain in the basement with it. The laugh loosened something in the house. For weeks after that, the repair became the rhythm of us. Not romance first, work first, trust, because trust had to carry weight. The official structural report arrived that afternoon. Elena sent it to her attorney herself. The counter notice went out before 5. Vance's attorney confirmed withdrawal of the lien threat the next morning, carefully phrased, with no apology. Ramirez opened a licensing board review. Elena kept every email in a folder labeled Foundation, and every time she added a document, she texted me a photo of the file count like we were tracking a championship score. I still worked my own jobs: custom timber frames, deck repairs, a barn restoration 30 miles out where the beams smelled like dust and sun. But after work, I came home, showered off sawdust, and walked next door if Elena had asked me to review a line, measure a temporary brace, or explain why one contractor's proposal used phrases that made my left eye twitch. The permanent repair required permits, engineered steel beams, a licensed crew, and more patience than either of us enjoyed. Elena handled the bids. I sat beside her when she asked, but she made the calls. She asked sharper questions each week. What grade steel? What fastener schedule? What inspection milestones? Why was disposal listed twice? Contractors who arrived expecting a nervous homeowner found a woman with a printed code report, a color-coded spreadsheet, and a master timber framer drinking black tea quietly in the corner until asked to speak. It was one of the more satisfying sights of my life. Warmth did not arrive as fireworks. It arrived as small permissions. She learned I forgot to eat when calculating load paths, so she put an apple beside my notebook without saying anything. I learned she hated overhead lights when stressed, so I changed the bulb above her kitchen table to a warmer one and pretended I had done it because the old bulb buzzed. She left a pencil tucked behind her ear so often that I bought a pack of carpenter's pencils and wrote her name on one as a joke. She used it until the letters wore off. One night, after the final beam order was placed, she stood in my doorway holding 2 takeout bags. I brought dinner, she said, and before you ask, yes, I ate some of the fries in the car because I am healing, not perfect. That is theft. That is quality control. We ate at my kitchen table, the same table where the first report had been built. The rain had stopped weeks before, but I still remembered the sound of paper rustling under the lamp and the way she had named the first PDF like she was staking a flag in enemy ground. What happens when the house is done? She asked near the end of the meal. I looked at her across the table. No panic in her hands now, no thumbnail digging into skin. What do you want to happen? She smiled faintly. That was annoyingly respectful. I practice. I noticed. The answer came slowly over the next months. The temporary shoring came down only after the engineered beams went in. Ramirez signed off on the final inspection on the 15th. Exactly 8 weeks after the morning Elena stopped me from leaving the kitchen, Vance's lien threat was expunged from the record. His license review moved forward, and Elena's attorney filed a civil claim for fraudulent billing and repair damages. There was no miracle check dropped from the sky, no public apology, no villain transformed by shame. Just process, evidence, deadlines met, paper filed, weight transferred. The old house survived because Elena did. Months later, the renovated kitchen smelled of roasted garlic, fresh cedar, and the faint clean tang of new finish on the butcher block island. I stood at that island with a piece of fine grit sandpaper in my hand, smoothing one final edge. The dripping tap that had started everything was gone, replaced by a new fixture Elena had picked herself after rejecting 6 options because, in her words, a faucet should not look like it wants to give a TED talk. The front door opened. Elena came in carrying groceries and a stack of mail. Her hair was pulled into a loose knot, and there was a smear of blue ink near her thumb. She dropped the groceries on the counter, looked at the butcher block, and narrowed her eyes. "You are sanding a finished surface. I am improving a finished surface. You are emotionally attached to edges. Edges reveal commitment." That sounds fake but confident. "It is a cornerstone of the trade." She set the mail beside me and laughed under her breath. Then her face changed. Not fear, not panic. Recognition. She pulled a county envelope from the stack and opened it with the tip of the carpenter's pencil I had given her. The document inside was the final deed confirmation and lien expungement record, proof that Vance's claim had been removed permanently from the property history. She read it twice. I set the sandpaper down. "Free and clear?" I asked. "Free and clear," she said. The words did not shake. Elena walked to the entry table, the one she had bought for the hallway after the renovation. On it sat a small bowl for keys, a coil of measuring tape, and the carpenter's pencil with her name half worn away. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a heavy brass key. It was not the old key to a damaged house. It was new, cut that morning, still bright at the edges. She set it on the butcher block, right over the spot I had just smoothed. "It's mine," she said. I nodded because it was... Then she looked up at me. "And I want it to be ours, if you want that too. Both names on the future we build. No leverage, no rescue debt, just a foundation." I looked at the key. The brass was cold when I picked it up, but it warmed quickly in my palm. Outside the window, the crooked bird feeder still hung from the fence, repaired but not replaced. Elena had insisted on keeping it because the birds liked it and because, according to her, not everything needed to look perfect to be worth trusting. It swayed gently in the afternoon light, anchored deeper than it used to be. My mentor's words came back one last time, changed by the house, by her, by everything we had learned to carry without forcing. "You don't force a seized joint, you ease the weight off it." Elena had never needed me to own the house, or the problem, or her choices. She had needed the weight eased long enough to stand, measure, decide, and reclaim what was hers. Now she was not asking me to take over the structure. She was inviting me to help maintain it. I closed my fingers around the brass key. "I'll get my tools," I said. She smiled. "For the house?" "For the foundation," I said. "And maybe for the bird feeder. It leans like a legal argument. That feeder has character. That feeder has untreated rot. It has survived more storms than your handwriting." I looked at her, at the house, at the quiet kitchen where the silence no longer felt like dread. It felt like space, like room, like a place where nothing had to be forced open. The tap did not drip. The floor did not sag. The key stayed warm in my hand. The end.